We've wrestled with the slow versus fast thinking dichotomy, the classic me versus us and us versus them scenarios. But let's zoom in on a related puzzle, the jump from having a moral thought or feeling to actually doing something about it. We saw that sometimes, like leaping into a river to save a child, it's almost automatic, a deeply ingrained reflex from childhood, miles away from the cold calculation of the frontal cortex weighing costs against benefits. Now we're facing a similar conundrum. Does all this talk of sympathy versus empathy, affect versus cognition, even what other animals do, actually predict who will perform a compassionate act? And crucially, does it predict if that act is effective, and how much self-interest is really involved? As we'll see, the gap between feeling empathetic and acting effectively, truly selflessly, can be enormous. Now, here's where things get tricky. Feeling empathy isn't always a magic bullet for good deeds. Leslie Jameson nails it with this idea of a dangerous sense of completion. It's tempting to think, oh, I felt their pain, so I've done my part. But the real peril isn't just that empathy makes us feel bad, it's that it can make us feel good. And that feeling good can lull us into thinking empathy is the whole story, the final destination, rather than just one step in a process, a catalyst for action. Think about it saying, I feel your pain can be just as useless, just as detached from actual help, as that bureaucratic classic. Look, I sympathize with your situation, but one doesn't even need the but to signal the end of the conversation. Validating someone's pain is great, sure, but alleviating that pain? That's the real goal. There's a broader reason why empathy might not translate into action, especially when we think about adolescents. Remember how they often feel the world's pains intensely. That's wonderful, but it frequently leads to frenzied self-absorption. Imagine this. Instead of genuinely trying to understand how someone else is feeling an other-oriented perspective, you start imagining how it would feel if this were happening to you. Suddenly, you are the center of the universe, and the main takeaway is that feeling someone's pain feels painful. And biologically, this switch flips on a dime. Show someone in pain and ask them to take a self-oriented perspective, and boom! Amygdala, anterior cingulate cortex ACC, insular cortex lights up, along with reports of distress and anxiety. Switch to an other-oriented perspective, and these areas are less active. The more extreme the self-focused state, the more likely the person's focus shifts to managing their own discomfort, metaphorically looking the other way. And guess what? We can predict this pretty reliably. Expose people to someone else's pain and monitor their heart rate. If their heart rate shoots up a lot, that's a peripheral sign of anxious, amygdala-driven arousal. They're less likely to act prosocially. The prosocial folks, their heart rates tend to decrease. They can hear the sound of someone else's need instead of being deafened by the distressed pounding in their own chests. So, if feeling your pain makes me feel awful, I'm probably going to prioritize number one myself over helping you. Same goes if you're dealing with your own stress. This ties into what we saw earlier. Increasing cognitive load makes people less prosocial towards strangers. Hungry? Less charitable. Hey, quit belly aching, my belly's aching. Feels socially excluded, less generous, less empathetic. Stress does the same thing, working through glucocorticoids. Mogul's group, including the author, showed that blocking glucocorticoid secretion made both mice and humans more empathic towards strangers. The bottom line is, if you're highly distressed, whether from resonating with someone else's problems or dealing with your own, tending to your own needs becomes the immediate priority. It's basic survival wiring kicking in. So when does empathy actually lead to compassionate action? Often it's when we manage a certain kind of detached distance. This brings to mind an anecdote about a Buddhist monk the author encountered. The monk admitted he sometimes cut short his meditation due to knee pain, but not because he felt the pain acutely. He did it as an act of kindness to his knees. It's a fascinating reframing. This aligns perfectly with the Buddhist approach to compassion. It's seen as a simple, almost self-evident imperative, not something requiring you to vicariously suffer alongside the person. You act compassionately because of a universal wish for good things for all beings, not because you're drowning in their misery. Now, this isn't just philosophy. Neuroscientists have actually studied this. Researchers like Richard Davidson and Tanya Singer, blessed by the Dalai Lama himself, who famously wanted to be a scientist, looked at Buddhist monks. One standout is Mathieu Ricard, a French-born monk who translates for the Dalai Lama and interestingly has a PhD in molecular biology. When shown images of human suffering and instructed to empathically feel the pain, Ricard's brain lit up just like anyone else's, the same circuits, and it was extremely aversive. He described it as becoming intolerable, emotionally exhausting. But when he practiced his Buddhist compassion technique, focusing on wishing well-being for those suffering, a totally different picture emerged. The amygdala went silent, replaced by heavy activation in the mesolimbic dopamine system. He described it as a warm positive state associated with a strong prosocial motivation. Other studies confirmed this. Volunteers underwent either empathy training, focusing on feeling the pain, or compassion training, focusing on generating warmth and care. The empathy group showed the usual pattern. Typical neuroimaging profiles, including heavy amygdala activation and a negative, anxious state. The compassion group, no amygdala overload. Instead, they showed heavy activation in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex DLPFC, the seat of cognitive control, plus coupling between the DLPFC and dopaminergic regions. Result? More positive emotions and a greater tendency toward prosocial behavior. It seems managing the affective storm with cognitive strategies yields better results. Okay, caveats time. This research is still pretty niche. We're talking about a handful of studies, mostly involving highly trained monks who meditate for hours daily. It's not exactly scalable for the average person. But the point is to highlight this scenario of detachment. Which leads us directly to the next big question. Even if empathy drives us to act, are those actions necessarily useful or effective? Does feeling good about helping guarantee we help in the right way? Paul Bloom's provocative 2014 article, Against Empathy, dives deep into this. He argues empathy can lead to compassionate acts that are far from ideal. Consider pathological altruism, think codependency, where someone's intense vicarious pain prevents them from administering tough love, enabling dysfunction. Or imagine empathizing so intensely that you only come up with solutions that would work for you, not the actual problem. Bloom gives the chilling example of a parent so distressed by their child's suffering they skip vaccinations. Healthcare professionals are trained to keep empathy at bay. Acupuncturists don't flinch at needles the way most of us would. As Jameson puts it, when anxious, we need to see the opposite of our fear, not its echo. Feeling good about helping isn't the same as helping effectively. Bloom also highlights how highly aroused empathy pushes us towards psychologically easy acts, the ones that require the least mental effort. Our compassion tends to focus on local suffering, concerning an identified, appealing individual, and involving a type of pain we recognize. This easily understandable pain trumps distant suffering involving groups or unfamiliar forms of hardship. It creates tunnel-visioned compassion that can be misplaced. Philosopher Jesse Prinz emphasizes the crucial distinction. The point isn't whose pain pains us the most, but who most needs our help. Our intuitive, empathetic responses are often biased by proximity and familiarity, not objective need. Alright, stop the presses. Science has apparently proven it can feel good to do good. Complete with mesolimbic dopamine system activation. You don't even need a brain scanner for this one. A 2008 study in Science gave people money, some to spend on themselves, some on others. Neither the amount nor spending on oneself increased happiness compared to baseline. Only spending it on someone else did. And get this, other subjects predicted the opposite, thinking spending on oneself would be happier. So the question arises, why does doing good feel good? Does this mean there's never a truly selfless act? Is the warm glow just a reward for being nice? For biologists, the answer often circles back to evolution. Cooperation and altruism, as discussed in Chapter 10, almost always contain some element of self-interest. If the very part of the brain central to empathy, the ACC, evolved to observe and learn from others' pain for your own benefit, expecting pure selflessness is a tall order. The self-oriented rewards of acting compassionately are practically endless. There's the interpersonal benefit of leaving the beneficiary in your debt, turning altruism into reciprocal altruism. There's the public benefit of reputation and acclaim, think celebrity photo ops. There's the cosmic version, appeasing moralizing gods in cultures that invented them to monitor behavior and tip the scales in your favor. And then there's the internal reward, the warm glow, lessened guilt, increased sense of connection, solidifying goodness in your self-definition. Science has even caught this self-interest component in the act. Some reflects concerns about self-definition. Highly charitable people often define themselves by their generosity, often linked to upbringing. Others show concern for reputational rewards, being seen as generous. Two studies showing dopaminergic activation during charitable acts had a crucial catch. The reward system only fired when an observer was present. When alone, dopamine tended to flow when subjects kept the money. Maimonides, the 12th century philosopher, argued the purest form of charity is anonymous giving and receiving. Brain scans suggest this might be the rarest form too. The desire for recognition seems baked into the system. Is self-interest ever truly absent? A 2007 study tackled this head-on. Subjects received unexpected money. Sometimes they were taxed, meaning a percentage was forcibly given to charity. Sometimes they could voluntarily donate the same amount. Same outcome, different feeling. If altruism were purely selfless, these scenarios should feel identical. But the results were fascinating. First, those loving money more showed less dopamine when taxed or donating versus receiving. Second, those getting a dopamine hit from being taxed were more likely to be generous voluntarily later, suggesting inequity aversion was a driver, a compassionate act independent of self-interest. Third, people reported more satisfaction and showed more dopamine when giving voluntarily than when forced. So, we're reinforced by various things: getting money, knowing the needy are helped, and the warm glow of voluntary effort. It's rare to get the second without the third. Scratch an altruist and you rarely find pure altruism bleeding. All things considered, it's remarkable that humans often feel pain when others are in pain. But the crucial issue remains: does that empathic state actually produce a compassionate act? Bridging that gap is tough, especially when the suffering is distant and unfamiliar: diseases we don't know, poverty we can't imagine, oppression we haven't experienced. Everything about our evolutionary past has honed us to respond to one face at a time, to local, familiar faces, to pain we ourselves have suffered. While it's better that compassion be driven by need rather than readily shared pain, we shouldn't expect our intuitions to be great guides for healing this far-flung, heterogeneous world. We probably need to be a bit easier on ourselves. Likewise, maybe we should ease up on the scratching an altruist problem. It feels mean-spirited to conclude that a bleeding altruist is just hypocritical. Perhaps, as the text suggests, the individual with unpure motives who bleeds is merely the product of altruism and reciprocity being evolutionarily inseparable. Better that our good acts are self-serving and self-aggrandizing than that they don't happen at all. Better that the myths we construct about ourselves are that we are gentle and giving, rather than that we prefer to be feared than loved, and that we aim to live well as the best revenge. Sometimes the self-interest is just the price of making the world a slightly better place. Finally, there's the challenge of acting when the empathic state is vivid and awful. We don't want cold-blooded killers, but neither do we want cold-blooded kindness. Yet, as we've seen, a degree of detachment is needed to actually act. Better than hearts racing in painful synchrony, priming us to flee. But this detachment isn't about choosing a purely cognitive, rational approach over an effective one. That's dangerous, because you can just think your way to conveniently concluding, "It's not my problem." The key isn't just having a good limbic heart or a frontal cortex that reasons you into action. It's about making compassion implicit and automatic, like potty training, riding a bike, or telling the truth. It becomes effortless. Let's shift gears now. We've talked about the gap between feeling and doing, and the messy role of self-interest. But there's another layer to this complexity: the power and peril of our unique human mastery of symbolism, especially metaphor. Think about iconic religious debates around graven images, the banning of icons, the iconoclasts destroying offensive pictures. From Orthodox Judaism to Calvinist to Sunni Islam, literal images have caused immense conflict. The Danish cartoons of Muhammad, the Charlie Hebdo massacre: people kill or die over symbols. Why? Because we are not just horses. We put pigment on cave walls not just to draw a horse, but to capture its likeness, gain its power, blur the line between image and reality. Language, especially metaphor, takes this to an extreme. Metaphor is everywhere. We're literally in a room, but metaphorically in a good mood, in luck, in love. We understand all hands on deck means everyone, not just literal hands. Kafka's Metamorphosis isn't about bugs. June doesn't literally bust out all over. We grasp that bread and wine symbolize body and blood, that Tchaikovsky's 1812 overture represents Napoleon getting his ass kicked. And that phrase, Napoleon getting his ass kicked, instantly conjures images of thousands dying cold and hungry. This symbolic power is immense, shaping our understanding and actions. So how does our brain handle this? Turns out it often gets confused, blending literal and symbolic meanings. Let's start with pain. The anterior cingulate cortex ACC is involved in processing the meaning of pain. Stub your toe, AC is active. Feel excluded in cyberball, ACC activates, rejection hurts, literally in the brain. Watch your loved one get shocked, ACC activates again. Vicarious pain engages the same circuitry. For those neurons, social and literal pain are fundamentally the same signal. The brain doesn't distinguish well between the metaphorical sting and the physical one. The confusion extends further. The neurotransmitter substance P is key to communicating literal pain signals. Interestingly, its levels are elevated in depression, and blocking it can have antidepressant effects. Stubbed toe, stubbed psyche. Feeling dread, anticipating a shock, also activates cortical parts of the pain network. And flip the coin, Schadenfreude. Watching a hated competitor fail activates dopaminergic reward pathways. Your pain is my gain. The brain literally wires pleasure to another's misfortune. Consider the insular cortex or insula. It mediates visceral responses. Bite rancid food, insula activates, protects you from toxins. Think about rancid food, insula activates. See disgusted faces, insula activates. Think about a truly reprehensible act, and the insula activates again. Moral disgust triggers the same visceral response as physical disgust. When the author heard about Sandy Hook, feeling sick to the stomach wasn't just a figure of speech, it was a genuine physiological reaction. The distance between the symbolic message and the meaning disappears. And this link is bidirectional. Contemplating moral disgust makes neutral food taste worse, while virtuous acts make it taste better. Our moral judgments literally alter our taste buds. This intertwining has huge political implications. Conservatives often have a lower threshold for visceral disgust, leading to the wisdom of repugnance idea. If something disgusts you physically, it's probably morally wrong. Sit someone near a foul odor, and they become more socially conservative. It's not just about aversion, it's linked to threat perception, like the sanctity of marriage or family being violated. A study showed reading about bacterial risks made people more negative about immigration when America was framed as a living organism. It's less about disgust for outsiders, and more about threat to the in-group. Is this purely visceral? Bloom argues no, or deeply intertwined? Hyde argues yes. Even rejecting a lousy offer activates the insula. Paul Rosen sums it up nicely. Disgust serves as an ethnic or outgroup marker. First, you're disgusted by how others smell, then by how they think. If metaphorical dirtiness equals badness, then metaphorical cleanliness equals goodness. Remember the Macbeth effect. Jung and Liljenquist showed that recalling immoral acts made people more likely to choose antiseptic wipes over pencils. Lying, especially consequential lies, increased washing behavior. And it gets specific. Lie with your mouth, reach for mouthwash. Lie with your hands, reach for hand soap. Embodied cognition. Culture matters too. East Asians wash their face after moral transgressions, saving face. But here's the kicker. Washing hands after recalling an immoral act decreased subsequent helpfulness. Those metaphorically dirty hands, once physically cleaned, were less likely to reach out to help. It's like washing away the moral obligation too. Our brains confuse literal and metaphorical sensation in other ways too. Barg's work is legendary. Holding a heavy clipboard made people judge job candidates as more serious. Handling rough puzzle pieces led to rating ambiguous interactions as less coordinated. Sitting in a hard chair made people perceive individuals as more stable and unemotional. Temperature matters too. Holding warm coffee made people rate someone as having a warmer personality. Holding cold coffee made them seem less generous. Even interoceptive sensations get mixed up. Hungry judges were harsher on parole requests. Hungry people are less generous and discount future rewards more. Hungering for fame and fortune are just metaphors, yet real hunger circuits get pulled in. And we use more abstract levels of cognition when thinking about distant events. Ask people to list camping supplies for tomorrow versus a month away. Tomorrow gets specific items, a month away gets general categories. Look at a graph showing paper usage increasing steadily, then dipping slightly at the end. If the office is nearby, people focus microanalytically on that last dip, seeing it as significant. If the office is on the other side of the planet, people take a macro view, seeing the dip as a mere aberration. Distance breeds abstraction. Why does this happen? Why can't our supposedly advanced brains keep literal and figurative straight? The answer lies in evolution as an improviser, a tinkerer. Symbolism is powerful, and other species show signs of it. Pavlov's dog salivating to a bell. But humans evolved incredibly complex abstractions like morality, deep empathy, and nuanced disgust incredibly quickly. Behaviorally modern humans are a blink in evolutionary time. There hasn't been enough time for completely new brain regions. Instead, evolution reused existing circuits. Think exaptation. feathers for flight, originally for temperature regulation. The insula evolved to purge guts of toxins got co-opted for moral disgust. The most unique neurons, the recently evolved von Economo neurons, are concentrated in the ACC and insula, suggesting this repurposing was sophisticated. We see hints of this elsewhere. Protoempathy in rodents centered in the ACC von Economo neurons in other apes, elephants, and cetaceans. Evolution took existing tools and ran with them. So wrapping up, our capacity for symbolic and metaphorical thought is a remarkable defining feature of humanity. But it comes with a glitch. We are remarkably poor at distinguishing between the metaphorical and the literal. This constant confusion, this blurring of lines between image and reality, between physical and moral disgust, between literal and metaphorical sensation, profoundly shapes our behavior, driving both our best intentions and our worst impulses. Understanding these neural quirks, these evolutionary improvisations gone slightly haywire, offers a fascinating lens through which to view the complexities of human nature.